DPM Heng Swee Keat.
Madam Speaker, I thank Member Mr. Christopher D'Souza for tabling this motion to commemorate and honour the important contributions of the Singapore Police Force and its officers. Mr. Chris D'Souza has given an excellent overview of how policing has evolved in Singapore since 1820. It is a story of growth and transformation that has enabled the police to contribute to nation building and keeping Singapore one of the safest cities in the world. Mr. Murali recounted acts of bravery of our officers, DSI Low, DSI Lim Siong, and paid tribute to the 125 officers who were killed in the line of duty, as well as their families. And Mr. Melvin Yong just highlighted the important role that many different officers played. Now, I rise to speak in support of this motion and to add a personal perspective of someone who has served in the Singapore Police Force for 17 years, including 5 when I was on course or seconded to the Ministry of Education. Listening to Mr. Patrick Tay recounting how his pager sounded when he was in the cinema with his then girlfriend reminded me of how my own dates with my own girlfriends were also interrupted very often that way. But I'm sure that many of our officers today will be interrupted by more than just a pager. I was telling my children about this pager story and they said, "Dad, what is a pager?" Now, I joined SPF 15 years after our independence. The old problems of street crimes, rioting, and secret society activities have been brought under control, thanks to the excellent work of many of our veteran officers, including many of them with us here today. And they were really in the rough and tumble in those early years when things were very difficult. But back in 1980, the problems of street crimes and secret society activities were still there. But new problems like commercial crimes were on the rise as our economy took off. Our founding Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, tasked Dr. Goh Keng Swee to review our policing approach to keep up with the times. The result was one of the most significant changes in policing strategy, where we adopted the neighborhood police post system, modeled after the Japanese Koban system. I was very excited to be part of this effort to implement this new way in my second year of service. I'll share why. As a fresh officer, our first assignment was to do investigations, and I was posted to Central Police Division at that time. On duty one day, I was deeply disturbed to attend to a case of a badly decomposing body. The old lady had died for several days in a rented cubicle in Chinatown, but no one knew until the stench was unbearable, as she was living all alone. As part of investigations, I uncovered a sum of cash and gold jewelry that she had saved up. I tried to trace the next of kin to return these valuables. What was very sad was that several relatives turned up to make the claim. But in order to verify this, I had to take statements from them, but none could say what they had done with her or for her. Now, it taught me that when members of the society are isolated and relationships were not built over time, we will run into long-term problems. And when people do not care for the people around them, the police would have a hard time trying to maintain law and order. And just before this, the year before this, I spent some time in Tokyo with Mr. Heng Chi Hao, a fellow police officer, to study the Koban system, as Dr. Goh Keng Swee had decided to adopt this community policing system. So when we were in our second year of service, after we finished our investigation stint, we were part of this effort to set up neighborhood police posts, or NPPs, all over the island, one in each constituency. NPP officers conducted house visits, checked on the well-being of citizens, gave crime prevention advice, and encouraged neighbors to form neighborhood watch group to look out for strangers and report suspicious activities. Special efforts were made to nurture the community spirit. In the kampongs, people knew each other well, but when relocated to HDB flats, they needed time to get to know one another and to adjust to a new way of life. It was critical to build that community spirit among neighbors, to look out for one another, to look out for criminals on the prowl. Besides their own efforts, the MPP officers also worked closely with grassroots advisors and volunteers, joining them to give crime prevention advice and helping to build the community spirit. For many officers, especially detectives, it was a huge cultural change. Police officers were traditionally seen as macho, gun-toting officers. The friendly policeman out to make friends with the public was seen as a step backward. And in fact, the MPP system was derided by some as no power police. MPP equals no power police. I see many of the seniors here smiling because that was a term that we used all the time at that time, right? No power police. Now, but the police commissioner, Dan Goh Yong Hong, persisted. And at the same time, the government was also enhancing punishment for some crimes. We had strict minimum sentences and death penalty for offences like trafficking of drugs above a certain quantity, robbery of firearms, and kidnapping. The message was simple. In Singapore, crime does not pay. I was later interviewed by an American professor when applying for my postgraduate studies. His question was simple. You had low crime rates in Singapore because of harsh punishment. I took some time to explain to him that the Singapore police had a holistic approach in dealing with law and order. First, every potential victim of crime, everyone is a potential victim of crime. So police officers spend a great deal of effort encouraging everyone to take prevention seriously. Prevention is better than cure. And the police worked with agencies to optimize the design of public spaces, especially with the HDB, to provide protections for the most vulnerable. Second, it is not punishment alone, but the probability of being caught. So it depends critically on whether you can solve a crime. Again, after several years of the MPP system, the police have built up enough trust and confidence for the public to come forward, to do their part. Each of us is a potential witness. Third, it is how our criminal justice system is organized to ensure fairness and justice. We have due processes and a public who supports taking action. And later on, as the systems evolved, the different agencies, first within the Ministry of Home Affairs, the Home Team, was one that worked closely together. Central Narcotics Bureau, the prisons, and the SCDF. And in fact, Mr. T. Tua Ba, the commissioner whom I served under, was just before that the director of prisons. He was a policeman that was seconded to become director of prisons. And when he came back with a new perspective about how we can help to reform those criminals who can be reformed. So I was glad that the professor agreed with me and told me years later, when we met again, that he learned a lot about our policing approach and not to take just a broad brush approach and come to conclusions. In fact, the main insight of our MPP system, which is part of the broader community policing approach, is this. 99% or more of the public are law-abiding. In many communities, unfortunately, the police treated most members of the public, all segments of them, as potential criminals. This sets up an antagonistic relationship, the very exact opposite of what the police needs to rally the 99% against the 1% or less. We made the right choices in adopting the soft policing approach of building the community to partner one another and taking action to protect one another, and so as to deal with potential criminals. And this soft approach is complemented by investing in cutting-edge capabilities, whether it's in intelligence or in dealing with extreme stresses and hardened criminals. So while we can speak of policing approaches, the heart of it is in the trust and confidence of the public in the police. And this trust and confidence rests critically on the values and attributes of our officers. Over the years, we have selected and developed officers with integrity and to keep out corruption. The commissioner I first served under, Mr. Goh Yong Hong, had stories of him arresting those who tried to bribe him. And implementing community policing was a big change in culture for policemen who grew up in the 60s, and he gives full support to this very major change. When I was serving as commander of a police division, the then Commissioner Titwa Ba initiated an empowerment movement. He saw that as the situation that officers had to handle were becoming more complex, and that was over 20 years ago, they could not just rely on PGO, the Police General Order. The Police General Order sets out what you could or could not do. But Mr. T felt that every situation is different, and you cannot just rely on instructions. Rather, you have to know the ambit of the law, assess each situation on the ground that you encounter, exercise discretion, and take the right course of action. Now, this was another huge cultural change built on the earlier changes to community policing. Personally, I've learned much over the years and particularly enjoyed my final stint in the police as commander of the Jurong Police Division. The camaraderie among officers was strong and the level of dedication was outstanding. And the public and MPs and grassroots leaders in the Jurong area were most supportive. Every few weeks, I had the pleasure of presenting a pewter plaque to members of the public for their acts of bravery in helping us arrest criminals, including snatch thieves and molesters. In fact, about 30% of our crime then was solved with the help of the public then. And today I'm glad that this ratio remains high, between 20 to 30%, even as our policing capabilities have risen. So Mr. Christopher D'Souza's recount of the journey of the police over the 200 years has one key element that we must constantly adapt and innovate. So I'm glad that Minister Shanmugam has set up the HTX, the Home Team Science and Technology Agency, to invest in building new capabilities, especially in the digital area, while Commissioner Heng Swee Keat is building the frontline capabilities of officers to tackle new and complex crimes, including those in cyberspace. Above all, it is critical that we continue to invest in our officers, the values that underpin their work: integrity, fairness, discipline, dedication. And as crimes become more cross-border and sophisticated, our officers will need to be even more skilled. So let me take this opportunity to thank the officers who have served over the years, including many in this House, officers who were regulars, men and women, NS men, volunteers, as well as civilians supporting our officers. And I especially thank those who served together with me during my years in the police. I'm confident that the Singapore Police Force will continue to scale new heights and to keep Singapore safe and secure. So let us, as members of the public, support our frontline officers, and as members of this House, support legislation to strengthen the capabilities of the police and our law enforcement agencies. Thank you.